And now it's Deborah Cobelt Live.
Hi, everybody, and thank you so much for joining me today on Deborah Cobelt Live, but also our Little Italy and Little Italy of LA podcast. I am thrilled to welcome Tom Dreesen to our show. Many of you are familiar with Tom. He's a well-known actor, a comic. He's performed with Sinatra, so many in the Rat Pack, and so many iconic performers. He's made over 500 appearances on national television, 61 times on The Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. He's a favorite guest of David Letterman and even hosted the show when David was out of town. Gosh, there was a lot for us to talk about. Thank you so much for joining us, Tom.
I'm happy to be here, Deborah. I've been looking forward to this.
I have too. A lot of things have gotten in our way. In fact, we met in Beverly Hills at Il Fornaio when they were doing an event over for NIAF. And ever since then, we've been trying to do this interview. So thanks so much for being here.
I'm happy to be here. And NIAF, National Italian American Federation. I've done a lot of shows for them through the years. I even emceed for them in Washington, D.C. for their national event, which was really a lot of fun because everybody and show business was there, but also all those politicians that were Italian. So it was a great night. It was just a wonderful night, and they do great work in NIAF. Yeah.
Yeah, as do you. So what I always love to do is dial it back a little bit. What kind of kid were you? Were you an angel in school? I'm kind of setting this up. And what got you into performing?
Well, I wasn't an angel in school. I went to Catholic school, and nuns do not reward you for ad libs.
No, they don't.
Yeah.
No.
I love my nuns that taught me. They were Dominican nuns from Adrian, Michigan. I grew up on the south side of Chicago, a suburb called Harvey, Illinois. And there were 8 kids in our family. There were 4 boys and 4 girls. And we actually lived in a shack, a rat-infested, roach-infested shack. We had no bathtub and no shower and no hot water. And it wasn't during the Depression. I'm not that old. But it was a rough childhood. But I shined shoes in taverns. I set pins in bowling alleys. I caddied in the summertime. I sold newspapers on the corner, all to help feed my brothers and sisters. And none of this do I regret. I give motivation talk sometimes, and I always say, that is the greatest thing that ever happened to me.
Yeah.
It's like that. And so I went to Catholic school, and it was a great experience because the nuns were great teachers. And they came to teach and you came to learn, and no one interfered with that. I always say our nuns were members of the NRA, the National Ruler Association. they yeah, but they were great teachers, and I learned a lot from that, and it kind of shaped my life early in life for one reason, and we'll get off the subject. But my father was alcoholic, and he was a nice man, a gentleman, but he wasn't a great father. And when in first grade, I never forget, the nuns start telling us, I was a little boy, they start telling us we had a father in heaven. And I'm a little boy, I'm a father in heaven. And that his son came here to tell us about the Father in heaven, and they taught us the prayer about our Father who art in heaven. But I kept thinking, and they said, you can go to him with your problems. Well, as a little boy, this meant a lot to me, and I would do that. I've carried that throughout my whole life, all my years in the service and all this other thing, is that I still pray every night, before I go to sleep at night. So it was a great foundation going to Catholic school when I was a little boy.
Now, what got you into comedy? Was it just sort of everything in your life? Was it that you love to make people laugh? And how did you end up in comedy in Los Angeles? That's a long way from where you grew up.
Well, let me digress. While I was shining shoes in all the bars, my mom, there were 36 taverns in Harvey, Illinois, and there were 8 in my neighborhood. So my mom was a bartender in one of those, and so I would shine shoes in all the taverns, and I'd go to that bar last because my uncle owned that bar. My mom's sister's husband, Frank Polizzi, and he would tell jokes behind the bar. And I would go to the bar last, and I'd wait for the shifts to change in the factory while I was there, and then I'd go back out again. So I would watch him behind the bar telling jokes, and it just fascinated me that with his vocabulary, his vernacular, he could get this sound to come out of everybody's body, laughter, and fill the room like electricity, and unite all these people. They would just stop to hear his jokes, and And I thought that was incredible that he could do that. And I used to tell his jokes, many that should not be told on a Catholic school playground, by the way. So that fascinating. But I never thought I'd ever be in show business. By the time I was 16 years old, I had holes in my shoes, raggedy kid, and I dropped out of high school and started running with a pretty tough crowd. Ironically, I was in a like a gang in those days with leather jackets, but on the back, one of our guys knew how to paint real well, and he painted the Joker on our backs from Batman and Robin. So we were called the Jokers, ironically. And then went in the Navy when I was 17. I spent 4 years in the Navy. I served 9 months in a Marine Corps unit called NEGDF, Naval Emergency Ground Defense Force. And that also reshaped my life, helped me mature a lot. But I came out of the service, married, had a wife, and all of a sudden had children, and I ended up another child, and I had a wife and 3 kids. But I'm wandering aimlessly. I'm going from job to job. I was working construction, labor, for concrete pouring sidewalks and basements, and working for carpenters. Labor. Then I went from there to working on a loading dock. I was a teamster loading trucks, and then I dropped my teamster card and became foreman and management at this trucking company where I was managing. Now I was the foreman of 48 teamsters who used to be my buddies, and now is their boss. That wasn't an easy transition either. But wandering aimlessly at that time, and then all of a sudden I left there and I started selling life insurance, and I joined a civic group called the JCs, Junior Chamber of Commerce, in those days, and they attacked the problems of the community. If there was any problems in the community, we would get together and resolve those problems. They taught me how Robert's Rules of Order, how to conduct a meeting, also how to serve on a committee, how to chair a committee, how to delegate authority to your committee members, so forth and so on. One of the problems in our community were our youth were using drugs, as in today, a serious problem. So I wrote a drug education program teaching grade school, eighth graders, the ills of drug abuse with humor. I would tell some, and I would get the kids laughing, and then then plant the ills of the drug abuse in our community. The night I proposed this to the JCs for them to run it as a JC project, to sanction it, a young black man had joined the chapter. He came from Norfolk, Virginia. He graduated Norfolk State College, and he was recruited by E.I. DuPont in Chicago as a marketing rep. He came up to me and said, I'd like to, no, let me digress another second. At that time, I was honestly praying, saying, God, what am I supposed to be doing in life? I'd be in a bar with my buddies at 2 o'clock in the morning saying, I don't belong here, but I didn't know where I belonged. But I kept saying, God, what am I supposed to be doing here? And so I was praying, actually, show me the way. And anyhow, after I proposed it to the JCs that night, and they sanctioned it, this young black man came up and said, I'd like to help you with that project. And I said, gee, thank you, but I already have a guy. I had a white friend named John DeBoer who was going to help me. And as my prayers were answered, the next day, John DeBoer called me and said, I can't work with you on that project. And I said, gee, what was that black guy's name? Tim Reid. Oh, yeah. So Tim and I got together. We worked on the program. We went into the grade schools. And the moment we walked in the classroom, I knew what a blessing this was, because the children were black and white. They were integrated. And when they saw it, we were 2 young guys walking into the classroom, we got their attention right away. We would play music to get their attention. And then we would do some fun off of one another, making each other laugh, making the kids laugh. And then we'd plant the seeds of the ills of drug abuse. And in that community, the program became #1 in 50 states and in 22 foreign countries, where JCs, through their publications on how to teach drug education at an elementary school level. At that time, they weren't teaching it at high school or college. So we were way before our time. One day, a little 8th grade girl walking out of the classroom said, you guys are funny. You ought to become a comedy team. And the thought of a black-white comedy team intrigued us because no one had ever done this before.
Right.
So there weren't any comedy clubs in America at that time. So we had to put together a nightclub act. We start working on what we thought was material. And we went into a nightclub one night and bombed, we recouped. But anyhow, we started becoming good at what we did. We started working what they call the Chitlin Circuit, black-owned, black-operated nightclubs all around the country. The Sugar Shack in Boston, the 20 Grand in Detroit, the High Chaparral in Chicago, the Burning Spear, Club Harlem, Cotton Club, all the North and the South. And anyhow, one day, after years, we had an album out. We did a couple of national shows, but the team, Tim Tim wanted to be more of an actor and later became Venus Flytrap on WKRP Cincinnati. He was on a show called Sister Sister. He played the father. He was at many shows. He's a director and a good actor. And I ended up here on the West Coast because in 1975, wherever you went in America, people say, what do you do for a living? I say, I'm a stand-up comedian. The next question out of their mouth was, oh, yeah? Have you ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you hadn't been on the, I didn't say the Tonight Show, you ever been on Johnny Carson? And if you hadn't been on it, in the eyes of America, you might want to be a comedian. You just weren't one now.
Right, right.
So how could I get on the Johnny Carson show? I decided to go it alone as a stand-up. We had to come out here and get on at the Comedy Store, which was the only game in town in those days. There wasn't a Laugh Factory or the Improvisation in those days. And so you had to pass the audition with Mitzi Shore, who owned the Comedy Store. And I did that. I struggled out here. I had a wife and 3 kids in Chicago. I ended up sleeping in an abandoned car. My wife wrote me a Dear John at that time to a house. I was house sitting at one time and then later in the car. But and said, this is your dream, not mine. I'm never going to move to California. Goodbye. You know, I later brought back out here and brought my kids out here. But anyhow, and so I finally got on the Tonight Show, and the rest is one appearance on the Tonight Show, my whole life changed. The next day, CBS signed me to a development deal. I got the wife and kids out here. I had an apartment in Van Nuys, California. I was paying $225 a month, and I couldn't even meet rent money. The night I got bumped 3 times, and I got on the 4th time. The next day, CBS signed me to a development deal. William Moore signed me. I got a check for $10,000 from CBS and $1,850 a month. In those days, my whole life changed, and I've never stopped working since that night.
What did you talk about that night, that first night? What was your, one of the skits or one of the jokes that you remember that really, really went over so well? And did you end up on the couch?
No, not the first time. On the 3rd time, you'll see the picture behind me over my shoulder. But the first night, I had met a comedian that I admired so much named Jack Benny. Jack Benny was a standard comedian in America, and I admired him because I think a person is an artist in any endeavor when they make their work look one word, effortless. Frank Sinatra made singing look easy. You will be my music. You will be my song. Yes, I can do that. No, you can't. He just made it look like you could. Jack Benny made comedy look easy. Just effortless. And so anyhow, I was a fan, and I had met him on a talk show in Chicago, and he gave me some advice. He said, when you go out in front of, if you ever get on the Tonight Show, and that was the furthest thing from my mind in those days, but he said, if you ever get on the Tonight Show, and there's 28 million people watch that show, don't walk out there and tell them what you think about the government, the airlines. Tell them about you. Tell jokes about your childhood growing up. And that way, after 6 minutes on the Tonight Show, 28 million people say, gosh, wasn't he funny? And he had 8 brothers and sisters, and he went to Catholic school, and he was an altar boy, and blah, blah, blah. You left you out there. But every joke that night worked. It just was, Johnny Carson was laughing behind me and Ed McMahon. But let me digress. When you're ready to walk out on that Tonight Show, you're behind that curtain. There's a song called One Moment in Time, and it really exemplifies that. This is that one moment in time when all of my dreams are a heartbeat away, and the answers are all up to me. You're behind that curtain, and not only did all the buyers in Vegas, all the managers, agents watch that show, but my mom had everybody back in Harvey, Illinois watching. If I bomb, I can't even go back home.
Of course. Wow. Absolutely. Go ahead, please.
Well, I'm just saying the pressure is enormous. Now you're behind that curtain, and Doc Severinsen's playing the music, and when the music stops, they're out of commercial, and a light starts hitting the screen, and now this is that moment. And Johnny Carson says, "We're back now, and I'm glad you're in such a good mood tonight." What a wonderful line to say. He said, "Because my next guest is making his first appearance on the Tonight Show. Will you welcome, please, Tom?" Please. They open a curtain, you walk out, and those bright lights hit you. You can't see the audience there in the shadow, and you hit your spot on the floor, and you're playing to the camera. Anyhow, every joke worked, boom, 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 worked. But the ending of it all, the audience, I got 8 applause, and I said, "You've been a wonderful audience. This is my first appearance on the Tonight Show. Show business is a tough life. So if you like me, just if you like me, and you're Protestant, say a prayer." I said, "If you're Catholic, light a candle. If you're Jewish, somebody in your family owns a nightclub. Tell them about me, will you please?"
I love that.
I went back through the curtain and Johnny called me back out for a second bow and he went like this, give that. And again, I've never stopped working since.
Wow. Absolutely. And what was he like?
Who, Johnny?
Yeah, not just the guy that we saw every night. I mean, look, I've read many books about him. He's a complicated guy. One of the best, absolutely, if not the best, at what he did. But what was he like off stage?
Believe it or not, very shy. As my friend David Letterman, very shy. And also but he was so helpful. He loved stand-up comedians. He wasn't a stand-up comedian. People think of him that, but he wasn't. He was a host of a show. He did monologues, but he always appreciated stand-up comedians. And that's why he launched so many of them, on the show. He wanted comedians on the show and he wanted them to score. Socially, I met him many times at Sinatra's home, out socially. And he was kind of a shy guy and also really smart, really, really smart. And oftentimes I would do a monologue, and when we'd go to commercial break, he'd take notes and he'd show me with the notes. That one joke you do, if you punch it up this way, I said, oh yeah, he was a good joke writer as well.
That would make sense. Plus, I would also imagine, having a terrific comic on his show is good for him. It's good for his show. Makes people feel good, right? It's like, you walk off stage, everybody's laughing. Now they're all happy. The audience at home is happy. The people, in the live studio are happy. So you were good for him too. Let me ask you, you signed, you said, with CAA after that moment. You were on 61 times. Also Letterman, hosted Letterman. How did you end up performing with Frank Sinatra? And tell us a little bit about that part of your life as well, and some of the others, because good heavens, you perform with so many notables, right? I mean, let's call it, Sammy Davis Jr., Smokey Robinson, Natalie Cole, Gladys Knight, Tony Orlando and Dawn, Liza Minnelli, big fan. But how did it happen with Sinatra? I know you'd be flying around with him on his jet. Talk to me about that moment. Let's relive it a little bit.
Well, let me, for a moment, I didn't sign with CAA, I signed with William Morris.
Oh, sorry. Sorry about that.
And I've always said, William Morris agents, a lot of people say they don't have a heart. They have two hearts. One's as big as a pea and the other one's just a little bitty one.
Yeah, no, I apologize for that one. I have CAA on my mind. Go ahead.
That's okay. CAA is a great agency. If they want to sign me now, I'm willing.
Yeah. There you go. Let's see what happens after the show. But anyway, William Morris, to be clear.
Well,
okay, go ahead.
After my first appearance on The Tonight Show, Sammy Davis Jr. took me on the road for 3 years. I did his TV show called Sammy and Company, and I did a whole routine about growing up in a black neighborhood, and I played basketball on an all-black basketball team. I played football on an all-black football team, and those kind of routines, and Sammy just cracked up. And so he did a show called Sammy and Company that was coming out of Lake Tahoe, Harris Hotel. And so he took me on the road for 3 years. It took me to Vegas for my very first time. And then after that, I just started touring with other artists. At that time, there wasn't any cable television, just ABC, NBC, CBS. So you had to work clean. You had to do jokes that would make grandma and grandpa, mom and dad, and the kids laugh. So when cable came along, you could work as blue as you want to do, and they do, and they still do. But in those days, you couldn't. So singers wanted a comedian that could work and not insult their audience, that could work clean. So I was in demand because every time you did the Tonight Show, you did a new 5 minutes, and it had to be not two guys going to bar jokes. Johnny wanted original monologues. So a lot of singers were beckoning for me. As you pointed out, Gladys Knight, Tony Orlando and Dawn, et cetera, Mac Davis, I toured for years, James Darren, Frankie Avalon, Frank Dolly, a lot of my Italian buddies. Anyhow, finally, I'm touring with Smokey Robinson, and I'm working at Caesars in Lake Tahoe and opening for Smokey. And Frank Sinatra was appearing next door at Harrah's, and I had worked Harrah's many times. So I was there for a week, and I don't know why I decided that night, but one night I said, I'm going to go see Frank that night. I called over there, the maitre d' said, come on over. We'll find a place for you, Tom. Don't worry about it. I finished my show at Caesars, and if you know Tahoe, there's a casino between Caesars and Harrah's, and I rushed out the side door, didn't change out of my stage clothes because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. Frank Sinatra created more excitement walking to the microphone than most people did with their whole act. I'd seen him twice, and when he walked out on that stage, the room, electricity in that room. So I didn't want to miss that. I'm rushing into Harrah's. I'm running into the showroom, and out in front is the Vice President Holmes Hendrickson of Harrah's, and a big heavyset guy with a cigar. And Holmes Hendrickson saw me because I had worked for him many times. He said, "Oh, Tommy, come here, come here." I reluctantly went over there because I didn't want to miss Frank's opening. He said, "Tommy, this is Mickey Rudin." Well, I recognized the name. That was Frank Sinatra's lawyer, very powerful man in our business. He said, "Mickey, this is Tom Dreesen, and I think Tom would make a great opening act for Frank Sinatra." And
Wow.
the lawyer got a pained expression on his face like he heard that a million times. He winked at the vice president, but I caught the wink, and he looked at me and he said, "Hey, kid, if I gave you a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000?" I said, "Mr. Rudin, put it this way. If you gave me a week with Frank, would you want more than 50,000?" He said,
Wow.
"Oh, I like this kid." I made him laugh, you know. A week later, they called me, would I do 1 week with Frank in the Golden Nugget in Atlantic City? I thought, yeah, I'll try to get my picture taken with him, and I'll hang it in every bar back in Chicago, and I'll, you know. And so he, the second night when I was appearing with him, he took me out to dinner, he and his wife Barbara, and I can remember like it was yesterday. In the middle of the meal, he set his knife and his fork down, and he said, "I like your material and I like your style. I'd like you to do a few of the dates with me if you're interested." And I didn't say, "Let me check my calendar." And it turned into 45, 50 cities a year for almost 14 years, and a relationship, a friendship. I stayed in his home 6 times a year. He at first he was the boss of this tour. Then he became like a pal, a buddy. And then at the end, he was like a father to me, you know. Excuse me. And so, and I was a pallbearer at his funeral, and I spoke at his funeral, and I miss him every day of my life.
Wow. Unbelievable. But what was that like? Did you pinch yourself? Were you saying, how did this happen? How many times did you perform with him? Is there anything notable in him? I would imagine every experience for, opening act with him was notable. But is there anything that just really always sticks in your mind? Sort of like, I can't believe that happened with Frank Sinatra.
I wrote a book called Still Standing. The
Yes, you
subtitle
did. Right.
is my journey. I'm not trying to do a plug here, but the subtitle is My Journey from Streets and Saloons to the Stage and Sinatra. And the opening of that book is we were leaving Riverfront Stadium. I'd been touring with him for like 2.5 years. And just touring with him, not thinking much of it. We left Riverfront. His closing number in New York, New York. People were cheering and standing and cheering. He came off the stage. He said, "Let's go, Tommy." We got in the limousine, rushed us to the private jet, and we're flying into Chicago, my hometown, where I had a little boy. We're going to appear at the Chicago Theater. And
Wow.
little boy, I used to shine shoes next to that in the Chicago Theater. And now I was going back to the Chicago Theater, and my name was going to be on the marquee in my hometown with Frank Sinatra. But I'm taking all this for granted. And we're sitting in the jet. We were, they rushed us to the jet. We were flying over the venue. People weren't even in their cars yet. And Frank said, "Tommy, great show tonight." Yeah, we had a great audience. And he said, "Now we're going into Chicago." He said, "We're going to knock them dead." He talked about they renovated the Chicago Theater into its original form, and that it was sold out. Every show was sold out for like 4 days. He said, we'll knock them dead, Tommy." And all of a sudden, it hit me. Oh my God, I'm in Frank Sinatra's jet. And I've been touring with him for 2.5 years at that. And I'm flying to my hometown.
Mm.
My name is going to be on the marquee. And I couldn't talk. I got so choked up. He's sitting right across from me, and he's talking. And I'm so glad he kept talking, because I don't know what I was choked up. I was thinking, it just hit me like a ton of bricks. And that feeling never came back to me ever again. But that was that surreal moment, a pinch me moment where, oh my God, this is hard to believe, anyhow. And we had a great time in Chicago there. And I've performed within my hometown many times, and it was always great. He would walk out on stage in Chicago with no introduction. I'd finish my show. He'd walk out, no introduction, no orchestra. He'd walk out and he'd look at the audience. He'd say, "This is my kind of town, Chicago."
Oh,
And they would go wild. They would cheer and cheer and cheer.
what a beautiful time. I mean, do we have those moments now? Back in the day, it was a simpler time, and we all collectively had the same experience. Whereas now, we're splintered, right? Everything from streaming to, people are all over the place. We're not enjoying the same moment sort of at the same time, right? So that was a very special moment in entertainment where everybody knew about Frank and what he was doing. Do you know what I mean? We don't have that today. At least I don't think so.
No, I when Frank died, you know, let me digress for a second. What I loved about Frank Sinatra, I'm an ex-GI. I love this country. I
Mm,
I love the country. I love this country, and I love what
yeah.
it stands for. He did too. And when he would sing "The House I Live In," what is America to me? The audience, I mean, it was the most chilling moments to watch him do that song. And he would get to the part, the school, the house I play, but he'd say, but especially the people, the people, the people. That's
Mm,
America to me. He was so proud of being American and proud of being an Italian
wow.
American. As
Yeah.
an Italian American, he gave, and I'm half Irish and half Italian, My that's another story. But anyhow, that also, when Frank Sinatra died, I went to his house the day he died, on May 14th in 1998, and Barbara had called me and said, "Tom, he's gone," and so I came over to the house, and all of his friends were there, a lot of stars that you all know. As I was leaving his house, I had on a talk show on the radio, and I can't even remember what it was, but all about Frank Sinatra died, and a woman called in and she said to the host, "Something's wrong. My husband served in Vietnam, and he served in Korea, and he served in Vietnam." She said, and he's a tough guy, and he didn't cry when his own father died. He sucked that up.
Oh,
Today, he heard Frank Sinatra died. He came home. He's in his room right now, and he's crying like a baby. She said, I,
mm,
I, I don't get it, but I get it because I wish I could have got on the show. I'd say, if you were a Frank Sinatra fan, real Frank Sinatra fan, and his music was a soundtrack of your life. You got married, went steady to his music. When somebody loves you, it's no good enough to all of you got married to his music and love and marry stuff. You got divorced to his music, it's 2:45. There's no one in the place that you got remarried to his music. Love is lovelier the second time around. His music was a soundtrack of your life. As long as Frank Sinatra was out there singing somewhere, you were as young as you were the first time you heard his voice.
it's
You were
so true. Yeah.
the second when he died, part of us died. I always said that
Yeah.
part of us died, that we all knew, Sinatra fans knew that the sun is going to shine in the mornings to come. It just wasn't going to be as warm as it used to be.
You talked about he was very proud to be Italian. I am full-blooded Italian, and one day when I was out of school and looking for work, it was just tough, right? You know how that is when you're just out of school. And I was in New York City with my dad. We were walking past Carnegie Hall, backstage actually, and out comes Frank Sinatra, and the funny moment. And there's mobs of people. And my dad, who had quite a voice, he loved to sing opera. My dad's name was Tony Anthony. He was with all his pipes, little guy, big voice. He said, "Hey, Frank, my daughter, she's Italian." He goes, "We're looking for," and he just stopped and he turned. And I thought, "Oh my God, Dad." And he walked over, but he had his guy with him, right? And his guy handed him a card. He goes, "You call me tomorrow." We couldn't believe it. And then we walked away. He turned around. I was a young girl, and I couldn't believe it. So my dad said, "Here, I'm holding on to this for you in my wallet." And I said, "No, I'm holding on to it, Dad, in my bag." I lost it. I lost the card.
Oh
I
no.
lost the card. And I should have given it to my dad. I should have memorized the number. This is before cell phones. And I thought, I lost the card. I mean, I didn't look, right? It was a quick moment, put it in my bag. What does that tell you? I don't know, right? Not sure what would have happened if I ever called the man, didn't even look at his name. It's a shocking moment. But I often wonder what would have happened at that moment. I was trying to break into broadcasting. This was the 90s. It was, not so easy. I know it doesn't even seem like that long ago, but the 90s was a long time ago for women to just be anchoring daily and doing that reporting. So I made it. I did fine anyway, but that was a moment. He stopped in his tracks when he heard "my daughter, we're Italian," and he stopped. Isn't
He
that
would
something?
he would have talked to you if he was in the office. His secretary at that time was Dorothy Allman.
Ah,
He, she would have taken the phone call, and you would have said, he gave us a card. If Frank was in the office, he would have got on the phone and talked to you. But also, you would have gotten autographed pictures. He would have got your address, and he would have sent you autographed pictures and stuff like that. That's what he.
yeah. It was
I saw him.
a darling moment. I never got to cover. My first TV job was in Atlantic City, So he performed down there, which was really neat. So I got to see him perform, but I was a young reporter, never really got to interview him. I did interview Sammy and a lot of those other folks, but never him, because then he stopped performing for a while. And but that was a neat moment for me. That was my only real my time with him. But you bring up being Italian. Let's talk a little bit about that, your Italian upbringing. There's a big shocker in your book. Would you tell our audience? I don't really want to give it away, but let's give it away a little bit, which kind of surprised me. And it was about your family, what you found out. Go ahead.
Yeah. As a little boy, I told you I admired this man, Frank Polizzi, who was my mother's sister's brother.
Yeah.
Mother's sister's husband, I mean. It was so he wasn't blood related. Okay. He married my aunt. And I admired him so much. And he liked me a lot. And he, every now and then he'd slip me an extra quarter or half a dollar when I was shining shoes. And when I was 6 years old, he bought me a cowboy outfit one time, a little cowboy. But anyhow, so I loved the guy, I really did. But I didn't look like my brothers and sisters. My brothers and sisters had blonde hair and blue eyes, looked like my dad, Walter Dreesen. And there was something every year. There were in my area, there were carnivals at all these Catholic churches and stuff. And the town next to Harvey was Blue Island, Illinois. And it was St. Donato's carnival every year. And every time I'd go, there was all Italian. Every time I'd go there, the music and the sounds and the smell. Dun, 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 dun. And as a little boy, I just loved that place. And I felt something about that place, and all the Italians around there. Anyhow, by the time I'm 13 years old and finding out where babies come from, I didn't want to think that my mom and dad did this, but I looked like my cousins. I looked like his sons, his cousin Don and his cousin and my cousin Don and my cousin Buzz. I looked like them, and I looked like him a little bit. But anyhow, one day I start thinking, oh no, I can't think this way. I'm thinking, did my mom have an affair with? And oh my gosh, I didn't want. Again, I didn't want. I'm 13 years old. I kept it to myself for about a year, and then one day I just went to him and I told him I wanted to talk to him. And he was, by the way, he was a very tough guy, a Sicilian. I saw him throw Teamsters out of his bar 2 at a time. If you swore in front of a woman or something like that out of the bar, he was really a tough guy. He wasn't much bigger than me either. And I saw him in so many fights. And if he even challenged the mafia in our neighborhood, he challenged them because he didn't like that at all. He was a proud Italian, and he thought that they were a scourge on the community. Anyhow, that's another story. And that's in my book too. But anyhow, one day I took him for a walk and I said, I need to talk to you. And he said, what is it about, Tommy? I said, I think that you're my father. And he said, what makes you think that? And I told him, I said, I don't look like my
Oops.
I look like Don and Buzz and blah, blah, blah. And I said, everywhere I go in Harvey, where a lot of people would say, hey, Polizzi, how you doing? I say, my name isn't Polizzi, my name is Dreesen. They say, oh, I said, that's my uncle. And I think they might have thought, oh, that's my mom's brother, Anyhow, he took a walk for a little while and he said, well, it's true. And he said, and you can go tell the world, but if you do, you'll ruin your mom and dad's marriage and you'll also ruin mine. But you have the right to do that. And I said, I don't want to tell anybody. I just needed to know. Anyhow, I felt strange around him, and I didn't get real close to him for a while because every time I get around, I felt uncomfortable at that time.
Sure.
Love the guy. I went in the Navy when I was 17. After a couple of years in the Navy, I came home on leave, and by that time, I didn't care who planted the seed. It didn't matter anymore. I'm now I'm much more mature, and we became very, very close. And our secret, I never told anybody. I never told my brothers and sisters, and he of course didn't either. And on his deathbed, I was there in the hospital, and everybody had gone. And he said to me, Tommy, do you have any regrets? Anything you want to get off your chest right now? I said, no, of course not. He said, no, don't, just because I don't have long to live, you feel like you want something. I said, I have nothing. I said, look. Everything I have, everything I own, everything at that time I was in show business, I said, it's because I came from you. I emulated you telling jokes behind the bar and everything. I said, do you have any regrets? He said, the only regret I have is that whenever you were on television and I'd be in a bar with my buddy or something like that, I couldn't say, that's my boy. I couldn't say, that's my kid. He said, I regret it. And I said, well, one day, he had a band called Frank Polizzi and the Venetianeers. In fact, my father, and I always call Walter Dreesen my father. He was my dad. Frank Polizzi was my biological father, but my dad played trumpet in his band. So he was a singer in the band too. And so I said one day, I told him, I said, one day I'll receive an award in show business. And if I do, I'll accept it in your name. And he turned his head, and it's the first time I ever saw him cry. He had tears.
Oh,
And years later, I received the Ellis Island Medal of Honor Award for humanitarian service for all the charities I've done. I ran 26 miles every year for multiple sclerosis, et cetera, et cetera. And they gave me on Ellis Island the Ellis Island Medal of Honor Award, where he came when he was 7 years old on the SS Italia, when he came from Italy when he was 7. And so I accepted it in my mom's name and his name. And so I fulfilled that wish.
what would you like to say to young kids and young performers now? Life is hard. And I think a lot of times younger people, because maybe they lived in it, they didn't have to go through so much shining shoes, all kinds of things. What would you say to a young person who's trying to make it right now, who's struggling, who's having a hard time?
I give motivation talks on 4 subjects: perception, visualization, self-talk, and develop a sense of humor. I've done this for years. I elaborate on those 4 points. I've done this for years for corporate America. I've done it at universities. I've done it all male schools, all female, and both of them. And I do one for comedians. I've done it in New York and Boston, around the country, and LA here many times, at the Laugh Factory and at the Comedy Store and at the Comedy Chateau. And it's called The Joy of Stand-Up Comedy and How to Get There. So what I tell them, and there is a lot of hardships. Stand-up comedy, Frank Sinatra always thought it was the hardest profession on the planet. He always said that, but stand-up comedy also, I believe 85% of all stand-up comedians I met in my life, this is my opinion, are insecure, neurotic, sometimes psychotic, love-starved wrecks, total wrecks. And the other 15% are gifted, confident people who say, I know how to write a joke and I know how to tell one. I like to think I'm in the latter, but never trust somebody that tells you they're sane. But but nonetheless, so I give talks on this. All I would say to young people starting out, if you're going to start to be a comedian, but then start where you are, wherever you're at, Toledo, Ohio, Birmingham, Alabama, wherever you are, start there, get up on stages, work as often as you can. Number 2, work as often as you can. Get up on stage everywhere you can. MC, do whatever you want to do, but get up on stage as often as you can, so you get this stage presence. If you can, read the book, The Magic of Believing by Claude Bristol. If you can't believe in yourself, you can't expect others to believe in you. So I've read literally hundreds of books on the powers of the mind, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind by Joseph Murphy, Maxwell Maltz, Norman Vincent Peale books. I've read them all. Number 4, realize no one is ever going to help you. If it's going to be done, you have to become marketable. No one's going to help you till you can make money for them. We're in show business. That's 2 words, show and business. When you can make money for them, that's when they come to you. And remind me to tell you of a Frank Sinatra statement about that. But in 5, don't ever quit. Bertram Russell said there are people in show business who become major stars simply because they didn't have sense enough to quit when they should have. And that's my story. My wife left me 3 times, took my children. I kept getting her back. She didn't want me in show business. She didn't marry a show business guy. She married a guy out of the service who was a construction worker. Her father brought a check home from a factory his whole life for 40 years, a check every Friday. This precarious show business that she did. She left me 3 times, but that's how tough it was. Don't ever quit. I slept in a car. I hitchhiked up and down Sunset Boulevard, begging to work for free at the Comedy Store, because I believed this is what I was here called for, to make people laugh. I wrote a poem many years ago called The Sound of Laughter. I won't do it for you, but the opening lines are, as far back as I can remember, or shortly thereafter, I love to hear the sound of laughter. And
That's beautiful.
Anyhow, my point is to them is, if that's your dream, you're only here on this planet for a blink of an eye. This planet was here 5 billion years before you were born. It's going to be here 5 billion years after you die. That means your lifetime on the planet is a blink of an eye, a speck of sand. This is your moment. Do what you want to do. If that's your dream, follow your dream as far as it'll go, and don't ever give up on it.
I have just a couple more questions for you, because you know what I want to do is I want to have you back because we don't have that much more time. But I'd love to have you back. I mean, we could do a show a week with you, honestly. But I want to go back for a moment, if we could be brief about it, at the Comedy Store, right? When you were discovered at the Comedy Store, can you briefly tell me a little bit about who were some of the folks that were performing, alongside of you, and how did you end up getting discovered? You talked about Mitzi. Briefly tell us a little bit about that, because some huge notables you performed alongside with there too.
I was working in those days at the Comedy Store with all these unknown comedians: Robin Williams, David Letterman, Jay Leno, Gallagher, Elaine Boozler, the girl waiting tables at a place was her name was Deborah Winger. All these unknown.
Incredible.
The night I auditioned for the Tonight, well, first of all, you had to get on at the Comedy Store, and it took me a long time. I would go there on Monday nights and try to get on, and finally I got on one night, and Mitzi was in the audience, Mitzi Shore, and she saw me, and I did like 10 minutes, and I came off. She said, "Well, you have stage presence, and I see material. We'll work you in somewhere." And I had emceed a little comedy room in Chicago that I started. So I said, "I can MC for you too." She said, "Well, that's true. Yeah." So that would get me more time on stage, So anyhow, I worked my way into the system, and I kept bugging the Tonight Show to try and come and see me. There was a softball team that the Comedy Store had, and we played against the Tonight Show. And on the softball team of the Tonight Show were talent coordinators, Paul Block, Craig Tennis, Howard Papish, Bob Dolce. These were the guys who would come and see you, and if they liked you, would get you on the Tonight Show. Well, so I met those guys, and I did a lot of little funny things that get to know them better, and that's another story for another time. But finally, I got Craig Tennis to come and see me at the Comedy Store one night, and I was auditioning that night. Three acts. There was a comedy team called Bauman Eston, a new kid named Billy Crystal. I don't know whatever happened to him, but anyhow, and me. And Billy's done quite well. Two of us got to Tonight Show that night, Billy and I. And
wow.
And
wow.
It was really and that was what you had to do, And Mitzi Shore, God rest her soul. I loved her. We had a great relationship. Later on, there was a Comedy Store strike that I was involved in, and we became estranged for a while. But before she died, we talked on the phone and everything. That the Comedy Store was the place. If you didn't pass Mitzi's audition, you might as well go back to Harvey, Illinois, or Toledo, Ohio, because at that time it was the only game in town, and that was the Tonight Show went. That the Comedy Store in 1975. Comedy was the rock and roll of the 70s. Every single night, these shows were looking for comedians. Johnny Carson, Merv Griffin, Mike Douglas, Dinah Shore, a Midnight Special, Rock Concert, Soul Train, American Bandstand. I was on all those shows, but only because I did my first appearance on the Tonight Show.
Yeah. And finally, for our Italian audience or Italian American audience, tell us how important it is to you, being Italian American, and some of the traditions you uphold.
I all my career I've done every Italian charity. One thing you never want to do is go on TV and say I'm Irish, Italian, and Catholic, because every Irish, Italian, and Catholic organization wants you to come and work for free, and I did, and I don't regret any of it. But what people do not really know the history of, and I've read so much, the history of Italian Americans in this country, of what they went through. And if you ever get a chance, see a movie called Cabrini, about Mother Cabrini. It's a brilliant movie, and the actors.
It's magnificent. I saw it. Please, people, Cabrini. I saw it not long ago, actually, at the Italian Cultural Institute. It was magnificent. Go ahead. Sorry to interrupt you.
And it showed what the Italians went through when they came here. A lot of people do not know some of the largest lynchings in America were done to Italian Americans in Louisiana, and Huntsville, Louisiana, and Frankfort, Illinois. What happened to our people? They came here. And the reason a lot of Italians do not know about the lynchings of the Italians, and they burned out a whole village in Pennsylvania of Italians. And a lot of people don't know, because our people put that behind them. And then they went to World War II, and more Italians than any other ethnicity served in World War II. The first Medal of Honor recipient, Bastiglione, from New Jersey, who received the Medal of Honor for beyond you wouldn't believe what he did. His courage. He came back and was doing a bomb drive, and he went back into combat and could have received another Medal of Honor for something he did more than he did the first time. But what Italians have contributed to not only this country but to the world. But all you hear about is mafia. That's all 100 and something movies are made about Italian Americans. I think 10 of them were positive. The rest are about gangsters. I thought this was shut off.
Oh, where'd you go, Tom?
I'm right here back. I'm sorry, I shut that phone off. But
we didn't even hear. But to your point, I think that's changed a lot because now everything's Italian food. And I just think it's, when I tell people I'm Italian on both sides. Even when I did the DNA thing, I don't know, I had like 2% Greek or something. I mean, I'm completely all in. And people, they love that. They understand our culture better. Hopefully we've gotten a little away from that whole mafia thing. I really hope so. But how important is to you that side of being Italian? Go ahead.
It really is, because it gives me a sense of pride. I ironically, I gravitate. Some of my dearest friends out here, I mean, I have a lot of are not Italian, but I mean, Frankie Valli, I don't mean to be name dropping, but Frankie Valli and I are good buddies. Frankie Avalon and I are good buddies. James Darren, God rest his soul. Dennis Farina and I are good buddies. Gary Sinise is Italian. Joe Mantegna. When we get together, it's like back in the old neighborhood again. We love to hang out and tell stories and stuff. And I have a great pride, again, a sense of pride for what they did in this country, what they stand for in this country.
Yeah.
But I could talk at a college or anywhere. I have a one-man show I do called The Man Who Made Sinatra Laugh. It's a 90-minute show that I do in theaters around the country. And it's stand-up comedy, but I go segue over to a bar and Frank starts singing to me like I'm behind the bar. It's 2:45. And I say the first time I heard that voice, I was 10 years old shining shoes in a bar on the south side of Chicago, and he was on the jukebox. And I take the audience from that little boy hearing Sinatra on the south side of Chicago to one day carrying his coffin out of a church in Beverly Hills, California.
Ooh.
And
Wow.
I'm telling stories, video and still photos authenticate the story on the screens. But anyhow,
wow.
So again, that sense of Italian pride has been in me ever since I realized that I was an Italian boy, and so again, all the contributions we've made. But I was saying, I could talk about Frank Sinatra for an hour and a half, and I'll say, are there any questions? And I swear to you, the first question was, Frank Sinatra in the mafia? That's the first question. And I always have to answer, no, he was not. Did he know those guys? Of course he knew those guys. We all did. If you came from an Italian neighborhood, they came to the weddings, they came to the funerals. Not only that, every nightclub in those days, they own those nightclubs. They own places in Las Vegas. You work for them. Did you know him? Of course you knew him, but anyhow, that's enough.
A beautiful life lived. And you talked about that, the performance that you do. Are you still doing that? Like, where can we see you? Where can we see you next performing?
Well, I'm home now for a little while. I've been on the road, but I have a website, tomdreesen.com, DRWSEN, tomdreesen.com, and the one man show, especially I tell you, I get rave reviews. Knock on wood, I get reviews. But when I do an all Italian group, they love it. It's just it's really a fun thing to do.
Yeah, I want to see you perform. I really do. So let's stay in touch. Let's maybe plan a dinner. Let's go out and continue this. And we'd love to have you back on the show, because an hour is not enough time with somebody like Tom Dreesen. We just can't get it all in. There's a whole lot. And for people who want to know more as well, pick up the book. Please give us the title again, Tom.
Still Standing. And the subtitle, It's My Journey. That's the cover of the book right there. You can get it on Amazon. It's got 450 5-star reviews on Amazon. I'm really proud of the book. I really am. Because I never wanted to write a book. And then I thought about it all the years. I journaled everything we did on the road and everything. And then I'm glad I wrote it, because a lot of people, it's triumph. It's about a struggling little boy that goes on that all of my dreams have come. All my prayers are answered. All of my dreams have come true, And I'm a big fan of your husband, John. You can tell him that.
I sure will. He's upstairs napping before he goes and does his show over in Burbank. So, he's also very predictable. He's living his dream too. As a little kid, he'd listen to the radio late at night, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. So, it's great when we're able to do what we dreamed of when we were little. And to your point, you don't give up. You keep going. If the door slams, you have to just find a crack in a door somewhere else and go through it. It's tough. This business is difficult. I think everything's difficult. You just have to keep going. So thank you for the fact that you kept going, because you're a real gift to all of us. And I'd love to have you back. So let's make that happen. Yeah. And everybody, you can find our interview with Tom Dreesen on all video and audio platforms of Deborah Cobelt Live, the Little Italy podcast, and Little Italy of LA podcast. Tell your friends about it as well. Download it, enjoy it. Please go to Tom Dreesen's website to see when he's performing next and pick up the book. The book is fantastic. I couldn't put it down, and neither could John. We both read it cover to cover. So thank you very much, Tom. I hope to see you soon. And thank you to our audience. Please also welcome your friends to listen to our show. See you next time. Bye-bye.